retail has never really existed in traditional finance in the same way that it does now.
10 years from now, we're going to see much more of our daily life linked or interlinked with the blockchain.
My concern is that for every move forward, there is additional risk. We want to move on from the fact that exchanges can't just go under because they are forced to have one-to-one backing, right? That's a very important part of it. We want to have proper regulation so exchanges know that what they've got is lawful.
If new traders want to learn, a good place to onboard them is via prop firms like Hola Prime, where we do have an educational platform. We do have coaches that go step by step and are willing to give you time, but that requires retail wanting to learn and develop themselves.
Yeah. Why does 100x or even 200x leverage exist? Welcome to the Crypto Talk podcast. I'm joined once again by Jacob and Oliver, and this week we're going to pick apart crypto regulation in 2025. Not an easy task, right?
Absolutely not. There's plenty going on in the sphere right now.
Do we need it though? Do we need regulation?
Absolutely. But I think bringing in this new regulation that's coming through, for example, the Genius Act that the US has just passed, I think that's a great stepping stone in the right direction. It's making sure that stablecoins in particular are a good, safe method of storing funds. And at the end of the day, what we really want to do is avoid another Terra Luna situation from 2022, where the 8th largest by market cap coin ended up collapsing, right? I believe that wiped out close to $40 billion. So you know, that's we want to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen again. And this new regulation that's come in is really going to help make sure that we are as safe as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's fuel to a fire. I think institutional money has driven this bull run so far, and changes in regulation like this are going to open more opportunity. I think, compliance and regulation equals, more clarity. More clarity allows the institutions to come in, add more capital. More capital creates opportunities. I think it's not something that, retail can fight against. So, it's going through, and I think the best thing we can do is work out how we play their game and win at their game, and just adjust and shift towards the new state.
And wouldn't you also say that now that institutions are coming in, they need a safe way to onboard funds onto the blockchain, right? If these big institutions like BlackRock are onboarding funds through methods or mechanisms that are leaky, you mentioned before this idea of a bucket full of water with holes in it, right? If you're onboarding funds onto the blockchain through these unsafe or undesirable ways, what's going to happen to the funds? What's going to happen to the industry? People are going to start losing trust. So the more regulation we have, to a degree, the safer our funds are, and the safer are the funds of people within who invest in BlackRock and all of the other institutions.
So if we go back a little bit, before we just list some of the legislation which is being passed specifically in the US, which is very relevant, we look to people who have been scammed with their money and they've been asked to invest their life savings, 40, 50K, 100K, and then they've lost it to scams. So from my perspective, and probably yours as traders, I've found that obviously we don't want that to happen, and that's awful. And I've heard these stories firsthand with people who have come to me looking to try and recover. And unfortunately, the answer is I can't help you. But the issue is I've always found it very frustrating that when I log on to an exchange, I feel like I'm having to do tests and I'm being handheld because I know what I'm doing, right? So I don't need that. But the other people do. So it's kind of, do we want regulation to appeal to the lowest possible denominator, right? People perhaps which just don't have the trading experience, people perhaps who just, are at risk. How do we protect those people without making it me feel like I'm walking into kindergarten every time I want to go and trade?
So you're talking from like a retail perspective, like when you're onboarding onto an exchange. I mean, controversial take, but I think, everyone's an adult if they're going on there and they're putting their money in, and I don't think there should be hand-holding. I'm a believer in sort of they'll have to learn the hard way if that's their way inclined. But I think less involvement, enough involvement to make sure that the regulation's there, so you're not going to get scammed. But as little involvement as possible, really. I think people adults, they need to treat everyone like that. You shouldn't be made to feel, like you say, like you're being handheld more so than is necessary.
Yeah, I don't want to be selfish about it. I mean, I don't want my comfort when I log in, right? Just have a little bit more screen real estate just because it's not that banner at the top. I don't want that to negatively affect people.
But do you know what? Do you know what it makes me feel like? It's like data collection. Like, I don't like being asked all these questions about how much money are you earning per year, and how much experience do you have doing this? And it's like, it feels very much like I'm KYCing before I've KYC'd.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
I agree. I find that annoying, and I think the best way to go about it is, the number one golden rule of trading is don't invest money that you're not willing to lose, right? If you don't know what you're doing, that's fine. Everyone learns and everyone starts somewhere. But perhaps the best way to go about it is to provide an educational platform which isn't mandatory, so that people like us don't feel like we're forced. Exactly. But the people who don't know what they're doing, they're not thrown into the deep end. Exactly.
We've got the Genius Act, we've got the Clarity Act in the US, and the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act. I've had to say that a lot this week. It's difficult to say that, make it sound entertaining. So they're obviously about helping government essentially make sense of it. So the SEC in the United States, and it's not just about the United States, but obviously what goes on with the dollar and what goes on there is very impactful on the industry. Yeah. So it's obviously making sure that, the SEC isn't butting heads unnecessarily with modern assets, which is what has happened, which is what XRP has suffered from, Binance has suffered from, with a lot of scrutiny, of course. And it's all very important, because we've seen a lot of exchanges go down, a lot of money's been lost, and of course we need to protect that. And we go back to that point you were saying about, people need to put on their big boy pants, right? But FICS exists in the UK to protect your money in banks, right? Mm-hmm. And Revolut, as an example, wants a UK banking license so it can benefit from such protections, because I haven't, thankfully, but some people do accidentally click the wrong button, send the money into the wrong person, or an old lady or an old man, perhaps, who doesn't know, sends the money in the wrong direction, right? And they are victims and they need to be supported. But we need to get the balance right, I think, is probably the argument, right? So I don't feel like I have to have my hand held when I don't need it, but it's there.
So, like you say, and I like what you brought up about customer journey then. So it's creating a simple, clear customer journey that at least gives you an option, so that you feel like you're not being pushed towards spending money. I think is probably the solution there. Yeah. It's like a case of, a simple extra click of a button just to say you are entering a live trading zone here, you're at risk of losing money. Have you gone to the learning hub or whatever it might be, if you're not experienced or something like that, and you can just click to go ahead. I don't know, but it's making sure that there's sort of clear pathway options. But does that need to be regulated, or should that just be best practice?
Well, it's interesting, because you spot trading is a completely different kettle of fish to futures, right? So I wouldn't get as irritated about having to jump through hoops, for example, if I want to crank the leverage up to 100x, right? Because, it's insane, right? I don't personally, I've done 20x leverage trades, but I've been sweating a little bit through it, right? And I think, there's this one guy, and who came to me, he was a really nice guy, really successful man. And he's not your typical victim, right? He's not the sort of, he's gone on an exchange. He hasn't known what he's doing, but he's got a lot of money, right? So he puts, $500,000, 2/3 of a mil on an exchange. Then he starts cranking up the leverage, right? And he's just like, he gets one win and he thinks, oh, right, so I'm shorting Solana. This is fantastic. I'm making money. I just made 20K, right? I just made 90K the next day. And then 7 days later, he's making it, right? But then, because he's not aware of TA, Bitcoin's running into support, right? Solana's running into support. And then all of a sudden, this happens. He accidentally, because of that confidence, puts an extra zero by accident. So it's not 50, it's 500. Then with leverage, and then the market shifts, and then he's liquidated for $500,000. Yeah. Right? Not your typical victim, but I think he
It
needs to
does
protect.
happen.
It does happen, and he needs to. And how do we stop that without stopping me, with experience, from doing the same thing?
I think you're completely right, and I think this is something that you definitely would have seen on like the small caps where people are making this sort of like crazy money, and it's just they just get to the point where price has got to go in two directions. It's going up or down, and yes, you can roll a dice and you can be right. You can be right a few times in a row, and then you build that confidence, like you say, and you put the extra zero on. But ultimately, like the liquidation for such a large amount like that, to me, the biggest issue there is not understanding, like you say, there's technical analysis, but not understanding how to place the trade in terms of using stop loss for protection. It's and I think that's for me that it comes down to education again. It brings it back to education. It brings it back to following a system and making yourself into a robot. I don't think. I just act on my system, and I know that my system's going to deliver 70% win rate.
So what about legislation then that enforces exchanges to say, well, you need to have X amount, like a prop firm, you have X amount of successful trades, you meet this criteria, and now you can move up to 5x leverage?
I think that is a valid argument. Start onboarding people through regular spot trading.
Yep.
The only thing is, how would it be successful trades? Because I could make a 0.5% successful trade. In theory, I've made money, so I can just cheat the system. But same with your example of someone puts in $500,000 into an exchange, shorts or longs something, makes 10%. Well, all of a sudden they make 50 grand in one trade, and that's also not a good solution, right? So is there a balance between you need to make X amount of trades and have X amount of profit?
Yeah.
Or you need to demonstrate the ability to be able to set a stop loss or things like that, so that people don't lose too much money, but they're not being handheld either.
Yeah, but it's like you go to a bank and you say, I want to start a small business. And you're not going to get like a massive amount to start with. But then you go back in 5 years and you go, look, my business has been profitable. I'm expanding. Oh, yeah, you can have more.
You can have 500,000, you can have 1 million.
But the difference is it's their money to give to you as a bank. But when it's your money, I don't want anyone telling me how much I can put down or not put down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's what irritates me. Exactly.
Because and it's like with the legislation or regulation stuff, I see it as, you go driving down a high street and it really frustrates you because there's, double yellow lines there's cars parked on both sides of the road.
No, let's go on about double yellow lines.
We're getting there. Don't worry, we're getting there. So you're driving down, there's cars parked on both sides of the roads, and you've always got people going on Facebook and they'll complain and go, I can't get through. They need to put double yellow lines in place. Guess what? They'll love for you to fight for that cause, and as soon as they put them in, try getting them away. Try getting them taken away. It will never happen. So if we put the regulation in now and we fight to say you've got to pass this test before you can spend your own money or upload your own money, we're never going to get that taken away. And it's a freedom that's just going to be stripped back and back if we, based on this. And it's like, it goes back to the thing of just, it's your own money, you're going to lose, then you've got to pull yourself together and go and educate yourself more.
But let's take it back a moment, right? If we're saying use your own money, then you're only allowed to spot trade. If we're talking about margin and leverage trading, that's no longer your own money. That's the exchanges.
No. So should the exchange be able to decide what to give you, or should the government be able to decide what the exchange decides to give you? Because you're only going to liquidate yourself. You're not liquidating their money. You're using their money for the margin. But when your account hits zero, you're gone. It's not going to spend more money than you have in there. You know what I mean? Or more money than you have against your stop loss. So their money's not at risk, only yours.
Why don't we look at this from a different perspective then? Why does 100x or even 200x leverage exist?
To get people to, it goes back to that hopium buy, right? If you're able to put 100x on the next random meme coin, someone's bound to do it. Someone's bound to put a couple $100 in, a couple hundred turns into a couple thousand. That's going to keep pumping volume into the coin.
And pay the exchange.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Who's the predator in that scenario?
It's got to be the exchange.
Yeah. And then you frame the conversation about exchanges need to be more responsible.
So maybe the regulation is around stuff like the margin amount, how much percent X you can put on it, more so than the consumer in terms of what they're allowed to do with that.
I cannot. I mean, I know there are like 100x strategies, I know there are, right? But I'm like, at what point does, again, on the other side of it, does, hodling, then you become a trader, then you become a gambler, right? And it's like, shouldn't the exchange be, because look, have I tried a 100x trade? Yeah. Wish I hadn't. Wish I hadn't.
Yeah. Right? It's like the old, and it's gone.
Yeah. And it's gone, hey, baby, and I've lost it.
And it's gone.
Yeah. It's like, no, because this is the thing. I'll tell you my story. And obviously, I knew enough not to do, with any capital, but I was just doing $100 play. $100 play. Yeah. Right? 100x. Right? And I had enough, and it worked. So I say, hey, babe, I just did my money in 2 seconds. Yeah. It's so sexy. It's so attractive. But then guess what happened the next time? Of course it did. Yeah. Because it's 100x. Yep. Right? You've got no room to maneuver. No. Right? So why does it exist? Because it's predatory. And we talk about like, well, this guy called up this old lady and asked for all his life savings. But is that the real criminal in the space?
I think regulation in that sense, there could definitely be a space for that. I think, on the consumer side, I'd like to see, I say less of it, there's not much going on anyway, but on the consumer side, I want to see, I don't want to see it coming in so much. I think people need to be able to, take responsibility for their own money. But yeah, I think there's certain parts of the space like that where regulation could probably benefit.
I mean, let's just turn to and we just mentioned gambling. We look at the United States, and there is a bit of a problem with gambling apps. I can't remember the name of the app off the top of my head. DraftKings is an example. Right, there it is. And it's so predatory. It's exploitative. And exploitative, is that the right word? It's so at what point, do you, because it's just they're trying to desperately sell people. They'll sell people. They'll send people gifts in the post, right? And they'll say, like a crown, and and the sort of bets you can make are insane. And it makes 100x sometimes look like it's the sane choice, right? So that is the world we live in, right? And there's a point where, I mean, I don't want to point the finger too much at these people, because ultimately we know as traders the discipline it takes to offset FOMO and all of these things. So therefore, how can we protect these people in those scenarios, right? And it's all very well to say, don't do this. Here's a YouTube video on educating you. But it's like, that's not the reality.
But also they make it really hard, because have you ever found a really good calculator for margin? It's like, it's always so confusing that like you said, you're putting on 100x and you realize you've got no space to maneuver in the other direction. Like a lot of people are going to go in not realizing that. They don't understand how to calculate leverage into a stop loss, and the fact that they've got their nice stop loss in there, but they don't realize they're going to get liquidated way sooner
before that.
Well, no, I have this conversation all the time, and it goes back to the basic principles of trading, which is, it's about protecting your capital first, not profit, getting profit. That's second. And when when I'm assessing what my leverage should be, it will be determined by where the liquidation point is and how many barriers are between it. Well, can it be touched by a black swan event? And if the answer is yes, I lower my leverage. Right. But that sounds like common sense, but it's based on my knowledge.
The two things you can control is your entry and where the stop loss is. And that should be the focus initially. Of course, you don't want to trade where you've got more risk going out than the potential reward, but you can't control where it's going to from a take profit perspective. But they're the two things you can control.
Would you get annoyed with a pop-up on an exchange saying, you do realize if you use this amount of leverage? Would you get annoyed by that? Or would you think that's a nice happy balance between a reality? Because some exchanges do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea, personally.
Just a gentle pop-up.
A
gentle.
Maybe not necessarily a pop-up, but somewhere in the corner of your screen. So what I have on my KuCoin account when I do margin trading is at the bottom I've got a little tag which gives me my risk or my debt to capital ratio, right? And that's a nice reminder. I try to keep to, let's say, a 70% capital to debt ratio, so that in the event of a black swan, or in the event of, let's say, news hits and something that I was swing trading and it was supposed to be going up, actually ended up dipping a bit. I had that on, for example, BitTenza the other week.
Yep.
I was targeting a 10% gain. It ended up gaining about 3-4% and then dipping 5%, maybe a bit less, below my buy zone. But because I had plenty of my own capital still in my account, I knew I could just rebuy the new low, take it up, and I dragged it up to over $400 eventually. So when you're able to see that debt to capital ratio, keep it at a safe level, I think it's fair to say you're quite safe.
But what about, because exchanges obviously have a lot going on in the background, monitoring what you're doing, right? That's how they play the game, right? Would it be helpful for them to turn a bit of that power into assessing, like prop firms to a degree, in terms of the challenges and so forth to get on board, turning it to some of that energy into assessing the behavior of their clients, essentially, the customers, and therefore, if they are doing silly behavior like that nice guy, which I just unfortunately had an unfortunate liquidation event, is that the thing? I mean, we have so much technology, AI, all of this tech now, which is rammed down our throats, which we don't need. And so how about we stop, I want to create a unicorn on my iPhone, but with glasses from Prada. Why don't we use that tech to assess traders properly? And then the pop-up doesn't have to come up, right? Or an educational video can come up. You need to watch this before you can continue. If you're doing crazy things and you've lost like 10K in like 2 days because of crazy leverage. I mean, it sounds very, because when we look at like the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, and all of these legislation, all these different things which are being passed around the world, they're about helping citizens obviously interact and to a degree, but it's more a case of just opening the doors of the bank. It's not really doing anything much more than
benefiting institutions.
Yeah.
And yes, it's going to push us, it's fuel to the fire because it's going to continue to push the price and push more money and more capital into the space. But it's been institutional focused, like you say, rather than consumer focused.
But it's sold
but
to a degree of consumer focused.
You were talking about like the AI piece and integrating that.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm always one where I'm like, well, how's everyone else doing? I want to compare myself to what's the average. But I have a funny feeling that if you started to put that story forward, it's not going to be a nice one to tell for the exchanges to say this is where you sit against, like it's kind of too revealing.
Yeah, I want to make this trade now. Hang on, I got a pop-up saying I suck.
Yeah. it was more so, I reckon everyone's losing. You know what I mean? Like, I think we always talk about it's like the 1% that can, really push through and become, quite profitable from it. And I don't know if that's true, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that give up after 3-6 months or X amount of losses. So it's like, where do those pop-ups come in and what are they supposed to say? You know what I mean? It's like, like you said about the pop-up, just to say, you've lost X amount, or your risk, your leverage is very high, something like that. Great, but just stick that little button in the corner that says "Don't ask again."
And honestly, you look at traditional finance, and you look at what we have to go through if we like buy something from a foreign in this country, in the UK, right, where we're doing this podcast, like. So many text messages. Did you make this? Yes, leave me alone. I made this transaction. I know what I'm doing. I know how to use my debit card.
They even talk about banks when you go in for big lumps of sum, asking you what you're going to use it for.
Yeah, none of your business.
It's
none of your business. Well, it is my business.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not your business, but it is. But no, it's not. So we don't want it to be like that.
No.
But this is the problem. And if you look at crypto, as is it just going to become another asset class which is connected to traditional finance? I don't think we want that, and I think that if we are going to have it to exist, of course we want it to maintain this power to the people vibe, right? But we need to find a new way of regulating it. And so far, what I've seen, we haven't really seen any. All these acts, the Genius Act, Clarity Act, all this kind of stuff, it doesn't really address any of these issues. Mm-hmm. It makes this exchange less likely to have a lawsuit because they know how to prepare their securities and their assets and everything and make sure it's all the I's and the T's and everything are dotted and crossed. But I think this is the interesting part of the space, right? What happens next? Because my concern is that the opening of the doors will just open the doors for the big players even wider, right? Then it's just the victims remain the same, but the predators are different, right? And I mean, we're talking about Bitcoin's current price action and how we feel like retail is potentially locked out of it, and now it's just an ETF game, and all the price action is just people just playing their games, getting their lower prices, which has always been the case. But I think the regulation in the space, we need to think a bit deeper. But I don't have a solution. I mean, do you guys have any pie in the sky ideas?
Not necessarily a solution, but one thing I think is very prominent is retail has never really existed in traditional finance in the same way that it does now. Like I find that there was never really an avenue to learn how to trade. It's not something you could do at school, or it's very kind of specialized, and it's certainly nothing that sort of, there wasn't sort of good courses out there or anything like that to be able to
no one taught me how to trade stocks.
No. And whereas with crypto, it's becoming a much bigger space now. But then the massive gap in the market is the education part is still missing. We need to catch up on that side of it, because there's people that are going in that don't have the knowledge to do it. It was never a pathway they even considered before, but now people are considering it. And like you said about solution, the opportunity is there to say that there is hand-holding needed within the exchanges, let's say, in terms of how to do what needs to be done. The opportunity is sort of wider than that, though, isn't it? Because if the exchanges aren't going to do anything because it's no benefit to them to do anything, financial benefit to them, the regulators are focusing on the institutions and they're not focusing on retail, then the gap remains the same and it needs to be solved elsewhere. But people want a one-stop shop. So going to an exchange, they want to be able to have their nice calculator on there and to be handheld through the process, but they also don't want to be treated like idiots. So it's kind of,
be made to feel like they're idiots.
Yes, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's the real space there is to somehow be able to entangle education and make it exciting enough that people want to take the time to do it, to make sure they're doing things properly. But creating this hopism, this FOMO, means act now. You've got to buy it now or you're going to be last, and it's like, it needs to be so quick, and it's too much to be quick.
Building on from that, absolutely. I think in general, the best way that someone can learn is if they truly want to learn. You can't force someone to learn. You can't force someone to do something. If that person wants results, they need to go out and search for it themselves. So if the institutions, if the legislations, if the government, if the exchanges are trying to make it so that they make as much money as possible, it's us as retail that need to make sure we are educating ourselves in the best way possible. Now, everyone learns differently. You might prefer reading. You might prefer watching videos. You might prefer having a coach like at Hola Prime, right? So if retail, new traders want to learn, a good place to onboard them is via prop firms like Hola Prime, where we do have an education system, we do have an educational platform, we do have coaches that go step by step and are willing to give you time to help you understand. If you've got questions, you can ask and they'll be answered. But that requires retail wanting to learn and develop themselves.
Yeah. But one of the other things which is interesting there, an interesting point as well, is how many people you said about the not wanting the ability to, like, not wanting to learn, basically, not wanting to put the hours in. And there's loads of people I know that tried it, gave it a shot, didn't like it, and they go, "Can't I just give you my capital and you can just invest it for me?" And then it opens up this, when we start thinking about solutions and go down rabbit holes of going, well, does it need to be something that's kind of more like a pension pot where you put it in and it gets reinvested for you in various places, and someone's doing it for you and it takes it all away, and because they don't want to be involved. There's people that want complete control, like me, because I'm a psycho, and then there's other people that just want to go, there you go, you know what you're doing, you're better than me, and you can do it yourself. And maybe it's more clearer, transparent options around that. More of a fun.
Look, I don't want to bring it. She'll tell me off, but my partner loves scratch cards. Right? She's kind of discovered them when she came over to the UK. Loves them, but she's also learning to trade. How do you balance those two things? Right? And this is the problem, because everyone wants to get rich quick, right? For sure. And I've had students which will come to me and they can't do it. they can't do the charting, they can't do the time,
Yeah.
and there is a pathway for them, and give them a bit of information. But it is very difficult because everyone does want to just get rich quick. Everyone wants to find that diamond in the rough, pan for gold. It's always been the way it is.
Yeah.
And the reality is that on my tutoring website, there's like an image of a 500% gain trade, right? And I'm falling into the same trap. I'm doing the same sell, right? Come to me as a tutor, and this is a sort of gain, and I'm doing it. And I feel guilty about it because it's kind of part of the space. And we can all say, all three of us now we're going to charge the space, and we're going to educate everybody, like Hola Prime is trying to do, and we're trying to make sure everyone is safe. But the reality is that it's such a slow burn, and it's going to be 10 years until, because let's look at the drop litter campaign in the 80s in this country. Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. And it led to my generation, certainly, just not dropping litter. And I haven't seen that from the government here. I haven't seen that. So instead of just telling exchanges, you can't do this, you can't do that, why don't we start a campaign, hire people like you, people like me, to be on TV and adverts and say, hey, right? I mean, why don't exchanges do that? Why is Hola Prime doing it, but exchanges don't? Because guess what? Education isn't good for their profits.
Well, they don't care if they win or lose. It's still fees.
So So Genius Act, Clarity Act, Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act. What comes after is more important.
Yeah.
Right. And it is all about it. It's that kind of area which we haven't delved into yet. And my concern is, it's all very well to say crypto regulation in 2025, clarity, chaos, or just controlled. It's about, this is a step in a direction. Right? It could still be exploited just like the current state of things. And we're on this journey. And I don't fully know what the solution is going to be. But my fear is that crypto will just become another asset class tied too stringently to old financial models and is stifled by it.
Yeah.
And we talked about, like, Bitcoin, is it going to be more volatile or less volatile as it gets bigger in order to protect these people? But I have this vision in the future of me going to a little town hall, renting it out, and just teaching people in the local community. Hey, if you want to get, you want this piece of paper, if you want to get to know crypto, take my number and come and join. And maybe it needs to be a grassroots movement, like it would have been like, this is a computer, this is Windows 3.1, this is a mouse, this is how like it was before the .com boom. And maybe it's on us.
Yeah, and do you know what? I've had the same thought about after school clubs, doing it in schools, running it in schools. You get a team of do it as like a not for profit, but you run it for free clubs, and you're teaching them to paper trade, and it's clear, simple strategies, just understanding what does RSI mean. What's overbought, oversold, little things like that, and just start really at the bottom.
I've thought as an educator, I've thought about that, but unfortunately, this is what I would run into. I would contact a school and I would say, I would like to give a seminar, because you have firemen coming in, you have policemen coming in, you have army people coming in. I want to talk about crypto. There's going to be parents going, you're promoting this unsafe asset class to my kid. Because we're not there yet. And the problem is, how do we get to there without risking people? Yeah. Right? And it is really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I would, for me, I wouldn't position it as crypto. I position it as trading, and I position it as something that's like you understand this, and safety, you get good protection. At this. You get protection from the one thing for me that was really telling was, during COVID, people are losing their jobs. They have nothing else to fall back on, nowhere else to make money from. This is something that you control, your destiny. There's not a boss to fire you. You can pick your hours. Yes, you've got to be ambitious and work hard, because it's you're going to quit your 9 to 5 for 24 hours, 7 days a week. But, the idea is you're in control of it. You've got the freedom to be able to do it. And this is something you can fall back on. And that was super important to me. That was very clear during COVID that was that reality.
Safe investing.
Yeah.
Do you want to invest safely? Do you want to be able to interact in this space safely? We will show you how. And I think that's probably where it needs to be.
Yep.
But it starts in schools. Everything starts in schools. It's like the schools which teach around the world, which teach more enterprising ideas.
Yeah.
It's extremely beneficial for their economies going forward. And before I ever got into trading, my friends were doing just like penny stocks or Apple stock or whatever, right? And it was just, the irony is, I got into trading because I wanted fast cash, because I saw the Bitcoin hit these things. But then I realized that it isn't like that.
No,
it isn't. And so I think the point is that there's a lot of further around regulation. The Genius Act, that's it, crypto's to the moon. It's the first step towards where we need to be. And it's very easy that a lot of this legislation, which we just briefly mentioned, could be exploited by even more powerful people. And the space could be manipulated to the point where, these populist tokens in the MAME space become prevalent. And that area, which is very Ponzi-like, is extremely high risk. And if you're going into that area and you've got a fan base, so say, I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo token, right? I mean, people will buy it. They will, regardless of what they know or not. And you can't expect Ronaldo to be able to do a spot on TV and say, I know I'm promoting this, but just let's talk about the RSI, right? It's not going to happen, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But my concern is that, for every move forward, there is additional risk. Right. And I think we need to be very, very mindful. Obviously, we want to move on from the fact that exchanges can't just go under because they are forced to have one-to-one backing. Right. That's a very important part of it. We want to have proper regulation so exchanges know that what they've got is lawful and there's no conflict over, it's not a security, is a security. Like XRP. I mean, XRP probably would be so much higher up now if it wasn't for what they've gone through the last few years. Right. And I mean, that's nonsense. But there are other things like protecting us from exchanges, which are very important. I mean, US citizens have been locked out from Binance US pretty much for a long time. And this is the sort of thing we need to change. So, I mean, Jacob, where do you see the space in 10 years? Where do you see the space? My stomach's rumbling. That's a bit strange. I think I'm hungry for regulation.
Hungry for regulation.
It's a big question.
That is a very big question. 10 years from now, I think the blockchain is where the technology lies that will enable us to use it within the next decade or 2 or 3 down the line. And that's what's going to make greater efficiencies within our regular industries and workplaces.
Yeah. I mean, people don't fully understand, actually, the space. You look at render.
Not yet. Render,
Right?
please.
I love render.
I love render.
I mean, it's going to save Hollywood.
Never thought we would have this conversation.
Right. If render had been fully functional when they made the first Black Panther, that last CGI mess at the end would have been so much better because they would have had the resources to complete it in time. And this is an example of where the crypto space or the fervor around it is hiding. And this is why your point is fantastic. It's hiding the actual innovation and what will land as a foundation for the space in the future if we can stop the populist MAME takeover, potentially.
Of course, right. and like render's a great example because render for me is like it's the same way that I talk about Near Protocol and I say it's got that AI aspect to it which I really like and the stuff that they're doing undercover with the real world utility and solving for things is great. And render for me is one of those ones that it's not gaming, but it's just going to absolutely explode towards the end of the cycle, I believe, when sort of gaming and all the NFT stuff takes off and you start to see all of these Web3 games, really being pushed out hard.
Yeah, we look at like the NHS and all the problems the NHS has got.
Yeah. And
you just look at better record keeping.
Yeah.
Blockchain's got you covered.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. You've got all the patient pathway stuff, like you say, for hospitals, bed allocations, medical like medicine allocations, who's had what and when. Doing electoral, elections for it. There's no messing around. No one can argue it. Any sort of generalized sort of solicitor-based process, like purchasing a property or anything like that, that should all go through there in the future. It's going to do away with jobs, and I think there's going to be a lot of pushback because we talk about robots taking over, and it'll be blockchain taking over, on some of this stuff. But I think it's going to be for the better. It's going to make things more efficient. I think this is where we talk about, are we losing the decentralization stuff? No, because I think this keeps it peer to peer. We're going to lose it in some ways, but we're going to gain it in other ways with these protocols.
Yeah, NHS token, all in. Okay, so I think what we've established is that the current commentary on regulation is not what it seems. And we need to see a lot more. And even though we're not suggesting you shouldn't jump in and buy Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin to the moon. What we are saying is you need to recognize that the space is always going to be evolving, right? And like with everything, you still have to protect yourself. There's always going to be a scam. There's always going to be a problem, right? Just need to make sure that when you're engaging with anything, right? Even taking your car for a car wash, understand you need to take the radio wire off. You need to take it off, right? Yeah. Before you go in. It's this simple thing. And maybe we have a point to support people with that. But that was a really interesting conversation. Thank you. I think there's so much more to cover. But that was our take on crypto regulation. Is it clarity, chaos, or just controlled? And as you can see, we haven't got a definitive answer for you, but I hope we've given you a little bit of an idea about where the space is headed and how you can protect yourself. Because ultimately, we want to live we want to be free and we want to be protected at the same time. So it has to be a balance. But Oliver, Jacob, thank you so much for that. And
thank you very much.
We look forward to seeing you all in the next one. That's it for now. Thank you.
Hola Prime, trade with transparency.